Don't get distracted. You won't get tired of dying, will you?
Ultimate Custom Night is the back end of a story which has been going on for nearly 4 years, and finally the last nail has been put into the coffin, and this franchise is finally going to come to a rest. But that's only for the main story. There are still the multiple lines of other stories within the books and the movie itself that are continuing to go on. But today we're not taking a look at what's going to happen next, we're going to be taking a look back. Now this franchise became the mega hit it has become. Interesting to think about how this game came to be, but it came from the many bad reviews on his previous game, telling him how his characters moved like creepy animatronics, and it would end up creeping out a lot of reviewers and players of his previous game. At this point, Scott was tempted to throw in the towel. In fact, he pretty much did. Stopped making games as a whole and started looking after his family a bit more. But in the end, he couldn't stop himself from making games, and instead of being like a couple of other indie developers that have done things over the past, he took these reviews to heart and decided to make a game using these negative points. What he didn't see coming though was how quickly this game would blow up. About 4 years ago, the first video that really took notice by the YouTube community was Markiplier's first video on the Five Nights at Freddy's game. To this date, currently having over 66 million views and still going. And it's quite interesting to take a look back at that fact. Whilst that isn't the first ever Five Nights at Freddy's video on YouTube, nor is it the one that really got the game to grow at such a phenomenal rate, Markiplier was pretty much one of the biggest sole contenders to get FNAF where it is at this point in time. Another thing to think about is this game also gave rise to many different YouTube creators, to the names of Darko, giving 8-Bit Gaming such a boost in growth, 8-Bit Ryan, also Razowski, and if you really think about it, Five Nights at Freddy's actually gave Markiplier the massive push to get his channel to where it is currently. Looking back now, it's actually quite amazing to see how much an indie game would achieve. Of course, we still have Minecraft that was absolutely still popular at the time. Minecraft wouldn't actually lose such a massive popularity until midway through 2015. Something we didn't see coming, something that a lot of people would be surprised about, was how quickly Scott was to release the second and then third game. Within less than 6 months, the franchise had 3 games to its name already, with a 4th one underway already. It's quite interesting to see how much time Scott was putting into these games. It was like he was already intending to make a second game, as it came out only a few months after the first one. With the first game coming out in August, the second one would come out in November. 2 games in the 1 year underneath the same franchise name in less than a few months in between each other is such an amazing feat for such a small indie developer at the time. Some might think he had this plan, some might think he already had ideas going through his head of what this game would be and what it would become. One of the more interesting bits that actually gave Five Nights at Freddy's such an incredible viewer base was its own lore. You see, after a certain point, people stopped actually playing the game for the game itself, but more to the fact of its interesting lore, with many channels like Game Theorists growing off of the back of this game as well. Taking a look through the actual lore and all the theories behind this game, it's quite intriguing to see how much effort some people have actually put into this game. Like the amount of time some people have spent to make videos, to make scripts, to make things along those lines, all these videos. And look back at these older theories, it's quite interesting to go through, to see so many things that people have gotten wrong over the years, or all the things that we knew all along. Like to say, the Bite of 87. This was such an interesting thing to get to know of, and it really made the fan base, the player base, to go through, dig through these games like an absolute monster. The third game would probably be one of the more disappointments in the series, being underplayed comparative to the rest of them, and being a lot more easier comparing to the rest of them as well. But it was meant to be the first game to be the final game. As we all know, Scott didn't keep to that promise, and the final game wouldn't actually officially become to be till multiple years later. In 2015, we also got given Five Nights at Freddy's 4, which was officially meant to be the end of the game as well, the final chapter basically. But of course that didn't come to be either. To see only just a year later we have the next game in the series' 6th location. But let's go back to Five Nights 4 for a moment. One of the biggest debated things about this game was the bite at the end of Night 5. A lot of people were debating between it was being 1987 and 1983. The reason why 1983 was even brought to the picture for the first place was if you were to turn back and go inside the house after leaving it in one of the 8-bit minigames, you would go back to the TV, turn it on, and then Fredbear and friends would play on the TV, given the key date of 1983. Again, this was such a heavily debated topic until Sister Location came out, where officially or unofficially, Scott pretty much confirmed that that was the bite of 83. How was this a little bit done? Well, pretty much if you went to the office in night 5 of Sister Location and type in 1983, you'd get the cameras that would look into the rooms of Five Nights at Freddy's house, unofficially confirming the fact that this was indeed 1983. You see, Scott has made a habit that when something has been unclear to the community, he would repair it or give subtle hints to what it was in the next game. He's done this on multiple occasions, especially with the bite of 1983, being that people were debating between the bite of 1987 and the bite of 1983, to Scott to come in with the next game and just show that it was the bite of 1983. But now, moving on to Sister Location, this would be such an interesting game in the series. You see, at this point, a lot of people were just getting bored of the typical jump scare tropes and sitting in a room survive thing that the previous games have been living off of. So what did Scott do? Well, he gave you free roam in such a small map. Now, that's not such of a bad thing. It made the game a lot more interesting if you really think about it. And this Location was one of the weird games in between a lot of the bigger ones, and it's not that bad. It's not that great either, but it was a good spin on the actual normal gameplay mechanics itself. Control shocks and lights and trying to avoid being murdered by animatronics was such an interesting thing to have happen. Then we get the surprise release in December of 2017, where we would get Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. This game would be the final official canon game of the main series. And this game would pretty much just basically tie up all the loose ends people have been wondering about for the entirety of the game franchise. And then, yet again, it would open up a whole nother can of worms, some more loose ends that needed to be tied off. This time, Scott didn't really do much to tie them back off. We do have a book to look at though, with being the Freddy Files, which ends up being just a typical guide with a lot of secrets infused into the actual book itself. And then we come to Ultimate Custom Night, a game released barely a month ago, and it is awesome. This is actually such an interesting game because it doesn't heavily focus on the lore anymore, but instead giving you a massive challenge on seeing if you can beat stuff like 50-20 mode, 50 different animatronics in the one night. Try that for size. Seriously, think about it. There's not a lot of animatronics within the one night, and it actually is a struggle to play that night. It's possible, people have done it, but with DD involved in that game, you also get added 6 secret animatronics, which brings a lot more from the previous canon back into the game. Basically 56-20 mode. I'm going to be going more in depth about Ultimate Custom Night itself within the next few weeks. I don't know when the next essay video for Ultimate Custom Night will come out, but I plan to do one eventually. If you guys did end up enjoying this video and want to see some more, make sure to go down below and press subscribe and hit the notification bell, as I got a new essay video every single week. Also, if you want to cycle back through the previous around 7-8 of them, there's also a playlist which will be in the card above, waiting for you to click. But anyway guys, I hope you did enjoy this video. Until next time, Crazy Bear out.